Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Cope, and on behalf of the whole team I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on the best practices in virtual innovation. You know, we've all been thrown into a rather disruptive time in our lives, to say the least, thanks to COVID-19. My main hope today is that you and your loved ones are well, are staying healthy, and will remain so during the duration. Today, we're going to share our recommendations on how to make virtual collaboration events effective and engaging. We're sharing our insights as a way to help us all adjust to the new working environment we find ourselves in. Let me set some context for the presentation today. Organizations around the world are being impacted in unprecedented ways. At a strategic level, executives are grappling with business continuity and resiliency issues, and questioning current strategic plans and perhaps how those plans were formed. Priorities and resource allocations are shifting as organizations attempt to support remote workers yet maintain business objectives. At a tactical level, this changing landscape of priorities must be addressed and executed by a workforce that's simultaneously learning how to work remotely. We believe innovation in how we work and in the ways we deliver value is more important than ever. Innovative activities cannot afford to stop because of changing work arrangements. The good news is they don't have to. Using the guidelines and the tools that we will cover today, you and your teams can continue to engage, continue to collaborate, continue to innovate. But it'll also be powerful. Before we dive in, let me give a brief introduction to our team. RTI Innovation Advisors is a mission-driven innovation consultancy. We strive to help clients maximize the impact of their innovative efforts. We operate at strategic and tactical levels. At the strategic level, we help organizations apply innovative strategic planning processes based on future methods. We also help stand up and optimize the innovation function within an organization. At the tactical level, we help inform innovation and new product development teams with insights on emerging technologies, growth vectors, and partners that can enable disruptive and breakthrough innovations. It's clear that we're all in for a tough stretch over the next few months. Please know that we're eager to help you and your teams get through the days ahead. Let us know how we can be helpful to you, starting with the chat function that we have live today. Share your thoughts, your challenges, your issues, but also please be in touch with us afterwards and let us know how we might be able to collaborate and help you achieve your objectives. Now I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Jim Redden.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Jim Redden, and I'm coming to you today live from my living room here in Durham, North Carolina. No doubt many of you are joining us today from similarly unexpected places, maybe with some additional distractions in your new workspace. But at the same time, as Jeff mentioned, we're all trying to keep our businesses and our innovation teams moving forward. So as we adapt to this new working reality, we wanted to offer some of our best practices. As virtual kind of innovators ourselves, we, for many years, have been practicing using some of the tools that we're going to be sharing today. And we hope that these tools and these techniques will provide value to you and your teams and keep us innovating in this critical time. With that, I'm going to move to kind of give you the structure for what to expect here during the webinar today over the next hour. We're going to start with about 30 minutes of kind of webinar on virtual collaboration best practices. After that period, we're actually going to demo some of the virtual collaboration tools that we like to use and that we think will be valuable to you through a live collaboration session with all 90+ people that are here. Then at the end, we're going to save some time for Q&A after the fact. Many of us are facing some unique challenges here when it comes to virtual collaboration. Some of the things that I've heard recently from folks who are trying to keep their innovation teams moving, how do we do this in a remote environment? Certainly a challenge. What if I already had an in-person workshop scheduled? How do I transition that to an online session? What tools are available to support the new working styles that everybody kind of is forced into these days? And last but not least, how do I create an engaging yet productive virtual session? This can be tricky. To frame a little more context, when we think of virtual sessions, I like to think of them kind of in two different ways. There's webinars, like the one we're kind of participating in now, which is very kind of what I'll say one-to-many presentation. People on the other end are listening. There's also virtual collaborative sessions, where the goal is more about collaboration and working together and less about one-way flow of information. When you present using a webinar, there's certain roles, right? There's the content creator, the webinar host, and the participants. Similarly, in virtual collaborative sessions, there's kind of the planning and session design, there's the in-virtual room facilitation, and then there's participation as well. Now, I frame all this out because today we're focusing very specifically on the planning and session design for virtual collaborative sessions. In future webinars, we may cover tips and tricks for in-room facilitation during virtual sessions, but today we're going to stick at the planning and session design level, because good session design is really the foundation for effective virtual collaboration. So as I was thinking about kind of what tips and tricks I wanted to share, I first walked around when we still were in the office to some of my colleagues, and I said, hey, we're all kind of have lots of experience with these virtual sessions. What is your one best piece of advice for somebody who's thinking about designing or running one of these virtual sessions? So I wanted to share first some of their perspectives. First, I talked to Amanda Rose, and Amanda said, the most important thing is that there's way more planning and preparation involved than most new people to virtual collaboration probably think. I definitely agree. When you run these sessions, definitely leave adequate time for that preparation and that planning. It takes a lot of work. I then asked Moline, and she said, people immediately jump to their favorite virtual tools, but even more critical is good virtual event design. And I agree. We're going to be talking today about kind of how to design the event first and then move to a discussion of what tools will support that design. Both of these comments and pieces of advice, I think, speak very clearly to the need for lots of planning and preparation. In fact, it probably takes more planning and preparation to run a really good virtual session than it does an in-person session. And we all likely know how much work is involved in running in-person sessions. So if you attend or you see a really well-run and well-planned virtual collaboration session, just know there's a lot of work that went into making that happen smoothly. Lastly, I talked to my colleague, Carrie. Carrie said, don't look for ways to replicate your in-person process. Instead, look for ways to virtually accomplish the same objectives. And I thought that was absolutely spot on. You know, a lot of conferences have been canceled in the last month or so, and many of them have tried to shift to a virtual conference, putting all of their content online. And with the best of intentions, many of those session designers and those virtual conference designers first asked, how can we make sure that the presenters who are delivering this content to the participants get their message out? How do we set up, virtual Zoom meetings where presenters can present? And a lot of conferences kind of stopped there. But if you stop there, you kind of miss one of the main reasons many people attend conferences. So certainly people go in order to hear the speakers, but another primary objective of many conference participants is actually to network and to meet new people. So if you're a conference designer and thinking about moving things virtually, and you fail to think about or recognize the objective of participants to network, meet new people, and have spontaneous conversations, you may miss an opportunity to design a virtual session that brings even more value to the people that are attending. So that hits kind of Carrie's point right on the head. Rather than think simply, how can I translate what we were going to do in the room to a virtual environment? Instead, back up one step and say, what were we trying to accomplish? and how can we accomplish those same objectives virtually? Okay, so then that brings me to maybe my best piece of advice for virtual collaboration sessions. Virtual collaboration begins with good event design. Then once you have the basics and the principles of good event design in place, there's another layer of virtual event design that you can add to that to really make an effective session. But because really any virtual event begins with the principles of good event design, we're going to talk today about kind of how the principles for designing good in-person events translate and can be used to think about the adaptations you need to make for your virtual event design. After this webinar, we're going to be sending out 2 specific resources. The first on the bottom there is a resource for guiding facilitation, the design and facilitation of innovation events. That kind of speaks to the core, the foundation. Then our friends over at Mural produced what I think is a really good resource that talks to that extra layer of virtual event design that's kind of required to transition and make some of these events even more effective in the virtual environment. So that brings me to what I would consider to be our recipe, if you will, for virtual collaboration success. And that recipe has 4 parts, so we'll talk about each one here. We kind of already mentioned the foundation of all successful virtual collaboration events is good foundational event design, kind of the basics. Then on top of that, you want to layer on considerations, special constraints, or considerations for virtual engagements. Once you've got that in place, then you move to think about what tools can I add to this to help me accomplish these objectives in a virtual environment. And then last but not least, super critical as well, skilled virtual facilitation and execution. So with these 4 pieces in place, I believe you'll end up with a really good, effective virtual collaboration event. Now, because so many of us are transitioning and this virtual collaboration and even virtual event design is new, there's one more ingredient that I really think everybody should add to all of their virtual collaboration sessions, whether you're a participant or a designer. That last ingredient is patience, right? In this environment, everybody's trying new things. It's probably not going to go as well as you'd hope the first time. But with a little bit of patience and understanding, both for the virtual event designers and the participants, I think you can really improve over time and recreate some really powerful innovation activities. So let's talk for a minute about kind of the principles, the foundation of good event design. Anytime we're thinking about whether it's a day-long workshop, a half-day workshop, or sometimes even a 1-hour meeting that's really critical, we go through a very similar sequence of events to plan and prepare for that engagement. So rather than speak to all phases of this process, all the planning, the facilitation, and the follow-up, today we're going to narrow in on just 3 sections of this kind of process. And they're the 3 sections that I think have the most kind of adaptations for the virtual environment. So regardless of whether you're in person or virtual, you need to really have a firm grasp of what your objectives are. Then there's the logistical constraints of people, time, and place. And then you move to selecting activities and selecting tools. So we're going to walk through each of these and layer in some of our tips and best practices that'll hopefully help you as you're working through this process. Step number 1. Every good event begins with a clear and well-defined set of objectives. It's actually the most critical part of a good virtual event. And it's important to understand who the stakeholders are in setting those objectives and having conversations to make sure everybody's clear. We're running this 1-day workshop. We want to know what are the objectives that we have to accomplish. And we have a few tips. My first tip is that recognize that your business objectives may be different than your session objectives. What do I mean by that? Well, your business objective may be to launch a new product in the 2nd quarter of next year, right? These are sometimes bigger, longer term business objectives. The session objectives narrow into what exactly are we going to accomplish in this set amount of time that we have together. In the case I just mentioned, it may be in this session, we need to prioritize the specific customer needs that a new product should address. Next, when you're thinking about objectives, you want to identify both the stated and what I call latent objectives. So a stated objective may be that you want to work with your suppliers and have a collaborative session about how you're going to respond to some of the new challenges that COVID-19 has created. But perhaps one of your latent objectives is actually to gather your suppliers together and instill confidence in all of them that you as a leader kind of have a plan and are taking things very seriously and try to instill confidence in the ecosystem in which you operate. Similarly, if you're an innovation team, maybe one of those latent objectives, in addition to the stated objectives, might be to tap into a sense of mission in your team and remind them why it is that they're working towards the objective that they're working towards. Another example of kind of a latent objective might be, we need to all agree on the stated objective. Maybe we all need to agree on the plan forward. But the latent objective may be, if this single person, if Dan doesn't agree, we're really sunk. So our latent objective is, we really need Dan on board with this. Lastly, when you're thinking about objectives for your virtual event, there are likely a few additional objectives that you could put in place that are specific to the virtual environment. So for example, in this session, how are we going to maintain engagement while everyone's virtual, or build a sense of community amongst my team members? These are all good things to think about, and I absolutely recommend being explicit and writing down as you're planning your session what those objectives are. Okay, let's talk about people, time, and place. Some of these constraints that are going to bound what we can do in the time that we have. My first tip when it comes to virtual logistics: you want to set realistic expectations about what you can accomplish in the time that you have. This is particularly important in virtual environments where things likely take longer than they do in person. It's harder to have some of those conversations. It can be harder with technical difficulties. So you want to bake in enough time to make sure that you have enough time to accomplish the objectives that you set. Next, virtual breaks are just as essential as breaks during in-person workshops. In fact, I think they're even more important. I think a lot of us take for granted the advantage from moving one meeting to another, even just walking around the office from one conference room to the next. But already in the week or two that we've been remote, maybe some of you have had the experience of 4 or 5 hours of back-to-back virtual meetings glued to the desk. So as you're designing these sessions, make sure you're working in breaks for your virtual teams to get up and stretch, go get something to eat, go get something to drink. They're critical. Next, know who your participants are and kind of the tendencies that they're likely to bring to the session. The virtual environment tends to dial up some of our predispositions, whether that's a predisposition to kind of speak first and perhaps maybe speak more than others, or a predisposition to kind of fade into the background and just observe. As virtual facilitators, if we know who our participants are and their tendencies, we can help balance out the conversation and really get that collaborative conversation going in a more effective way. The last tip here: balance individual and group work, even in the virtual environment. Just because we have 3 hours of time together on Zoom doesn't mean that we all have to be working in the same space collaboratively for the full 3 hours. Think about ways to balance individual time with group time in an effective cadence that keeps people engaged. Okay, with the objectives set and thinking about people, time, and place, we then move on to selecting the activities, kind of designing the agenda, if you will, for what's going to happen in our virtual collaboration session. And going back to what Moline said, before we start picking out tools and plugging in tools into different sections, we first want to think about the full sequence of events that we want to take people through, and then select the tools that are going to help us accomplish that. So what we have here are some categories that maybe map to some specific objectives that your virtual event might have. We're going to go through each one, talk about kind of what that objective entails, and then give you some tools, some virtual tools that might help you accomplish that objective. Okay, so to start, immersing the audience. It's really critical, in person or virtually, that everybody comes to the meeting with a shared understanding or a certain baseline understanding in order to participate. As designers, we have to think about what that baseline is and how we're going to immerse participants in the information we need them to have in order to effectively participate. A lot of times this may involve sending out pre-work, sending out things to read ahead of time. Other times, if we're in say a brainstorming session, we want to stimulate creative thinking at the very beginning so that we get divergent out of the box ideas. These are all pieces of the immersive objective. So what are some tools that we can use for immersion? Well, certainly we're probably all very familiar with kind of pre-work communication tools, whether it's emails, sending out pre-read reports, recording webinars in advance, etc. There's other tools as well, whether it's instructive videos on YouTube or online learning resources that are widely available that can help people come in on the same page and ready to participate. Next, a core function of many collaboration sessions is discussion, right? Is sharing of ideas, perhaps sharing of perspectives. And so there's certain virtual tools that we can use to help facilitate this as well. We're on Zoom right now. Many of us are familiar and have become intimately familiar over the last few weeks with various video conferencing platforms. But there's other platforms as well, whether that's video sharing platforms like Facebook Live or Instagram Live, or virtual idea sharing spaces like Google Docs or online whiteboards like Miro. When thinking about how to use these sharing tools, it's really critical that folks consider the objective, that the information that they're trying to get exchanged, and think about the best medium for facilitating that exchange. Another objective that is common, especially in innovation sessions, is divergent thinking, generating lists, generating options. This growth or this generation stage has several tools that you can use to do this, accomplish this virtually. Many times in physical spaces, whiteboards are used in order to capture divergent thinking, whiteboards and Post-it notes. There's actually digital whiteboarding software that's out there, some of which we'll demonstrate here as part of the session, that can help you do that collaborative engagement, that divergent thinking and capture virtually with your teams. In the absence of those whiteboarding platforms, certainly document collaboration, whether it's Google Docs or Microsoft Teams, can allow people to work in a shared virtual space at the same time, in the same way that you would a shared physical space. Okay, so once we have our long list of options, a lot of times in a setting, we need to prioritize, we need to converge, we need to decide. This step is perhaps one of the more time-consuming steps in the virtual space because a lot of times there's discussion involved in prioritization. And so my piece of advice for the convergent step would be make sure you're allowing adequate conversation space in the virtual environment as you go through that prioritization step. There's digital tools that you can use as well to help that convergence. Certainly online poll software or baked-in poll software like Survey Gizmo and things can help you do quick real-time polling of your participants. Similarly, many of you have probably participated in dot voting exercises during ideation. The online whiteboard platforms like Mural and Stormboard often have that feature, that dot voting feature built in as well. And that can be an effective way to kind of converge and get people's votes on the table. We're going to pause now and do a quick demonstration of some of the Zoom capabilities with polling. We're going to send a quick poll out to our audience here. We've done our own divergent thinking around what the next webinar in this series should be about, but we need your help to converge on what that top priority answer is. So you should see on your screen here a poll that's just popped up. Go ahead and click on the answer that you want to select and hit submit. If you're having challenges seeing the poll, we'll go ahead and post it in the chat window as well, so that you can respond through the chat window if you're having trouble with the software platform. All right, just about 10 more seconds to get your answers in. Okay, great. So I will, since we're kind of taking a pause here, I'm going to go ahead and remind you that if you have questions for either myself or Jeff or some of the other innovation advisors, drop those over in the chat window, and we're going to run those. We're going to look at those and answer some of those in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Okay, so once we've converged, we have our priority set. Oftentimes, there's a planning step that needs to occur. Maybe we need to assign roles and responsibilities. Maybe we need to carry forward and decide, what's the plan. There's collaborative planning tools that you can use to facilitate this step as well. Certainly online project management tools, whether it's Asana or Smartsheets, can be very helpful. Or even these virtual whiteboards can be set up in a way that allows you to look at the space at the same time and kind of assign roles and responsibilities. Okay, so we've covered a general kind of list of objectives and some tools that you might use. Next, we're going to kind of bring that to life with a little bit of a case study here, an example of how those principles in action. So as always, we want to start by understanding our objectives. So in this situation, your innovation team wants to brainstorm ways to create value for your customers amidst COVID-19. So that led you to think, hey, our primary session objective here today is going to be to create a prioritized list of ideas with a set of next steps for each of our top 5 ideas. So how do we go about kind of thinking about designing not only the sequence, but also the set of tools? Well, with our objectives in mind, we'll certainly understand our participants and our time constraints, but then we'll set up a sequence of activities. And for this, we first want to immerse folks in something that gets them thinking outside the box. Maybe it's a list of the specific challenges our customers are facing. Maybe it's just a more general kind of way to get people thinking divergently. We'll then want to give people an opportunity to generate ideas. This is kind of the divergent brainstorming phase, where hopefully we end up with 10, 15, 100 different ideas for ways we could help our customers. We'll then need to discuss each of those ideas so that everybody in the room has a full understanding of what each idea is and what's involved in it, so that they can effectively help the group converge to a top priority set. Then, of course, once we have our top 5 ideas, we'll need to establish a plan for what happens next. So with this sequence in place, we can then think about what tools are going to be effective in the virtual space for helping us accomplish each of these. In this example, we've decided we're going to send out a PowerPoint list compiled by one of our analysts of our customers' challenges that they're facing here amidst COVID-19. Then for the diverge, share, and converge phases, we're going to use a combination of video conferencing for discussion and Mural, which is an online whiteboard platform to help us capture ideas, sort ideas, and then vote on ideas. And then for this example, we're going to move then to Smartsheets and create an action plan with roles and responsibilities for who's doing what with these top ideas. Okay, so today we've covered very briefly Some considerations for aligning objectives in the virtual environment, people, time, and place, and thinking about those constraints, and then how to align those activities with specific tools that will help you accomplish them virtually. Now, as you can see, the things we've covered are really only one part of the broader planning, facilitation, and follow-up process that's really critical to achieving virtual collaboration success. In future webinars, we'll probably dig deeper into how to facilitate virtual sessions effectively, some tips and tricks. But before we kind of move on to the demonstration, I wanted to leave you with a few of my virtual facilitation tips. So if you're leading sessions, here's a couple considerations. Certainly there's more in the resources that we're going to send out, but here's what I would consider. First, either everybody should be virtual or everybody should be in person. Now, right now, that's not too difficult because everybody's kind of virtually confined. But in the months to come, as certain parts of the country maybe start going back to work, trying to run a split session where half the participants are virtual and half the participants are in the room is the hardest type of workshop to run. So we always recommend either everybody is in person or everybody participates virtually. Next, we always like to encourage participants to use video. Certainly video adds that extra element of body language and kind of extra information, not only for the facilitator to make sure people are engaged or if they want to chime in, but also for other participants as well as they're sharing their ideas. So video is really, really critical in these sessions. Next, as facilitator, you want to, at the beginning, set the rules of engagement. How are you going to be using the chat window? How can people let you know when they have a comment that they want to jump in with? These rules of engagement can help kind of some of the common missteps where people are either talking over each other or there's long pauses of silence, things everybody who's participated in either conference calls or video chats has experienced. Next, you never know what's going to go wrong. But in the virtual environment, there's so many more variables that can cause delays to your session. It's even more critical to build in flex time to your agenda so that you can recover and still accomplish what you need to accomplish in the time constraints that you have. And what's true of in-person sessions is also true of virtual events. People won't be upset if you end 5 or 10 minutes early to give them a chance to stretch before their next meeting. Of course, the testing and preparation of IT systems is essential. I've also found when I'm running virtual event sessions that it's helpful to have a second facilitator on the session with me. And if an individual participant is having technical difficulties, we move them to a separate breakout room and let them troubleshoot separately as opposed to in the entire group. Take frequent breaks, especially if your session is a long one. And then last but not least, use breakout rooms. We're gonna designate and show a few examples of what we mean by breakout rooms in a moment. I often get the question, how big, what size do you use for virtual events? And a lot of times the answer is it depends. But my rule of thumb for collaborating virtually is you want to keep the group size to about the same size that would fit around a physical whiteboard space. So that means to have a productive conversation or ideation session, if you have 15 people who you need to attend, you're probably going to have to break them out into at least 2, maybe 3 groups to have more in-depth conversations. Certainly, it looks like we have about 100 people on the call here. So effectively, we would, in a design session, end up with maybe 10 to 15 separate breakout rooms, each one that can facilitate some additional conversation. Okay, before we move to the demonstration of some of these tools, I just wanted to let everybody know we're holding what we're calling office hours with the innovation advisors. If you have some questions, you're trying to design a virtual collaboration session, or if you want some advice about how to turn your formerly in-person workshop into a virtual workshop, we would love to help you. There's lots of other tools we haven't gone in depth in here today that we know about. go ahead and sign up. We'll be sending out this link in the follow-up materials. You can also screenshot it here now. Sign up for office hours. We would love to talk with you. Okay, at this point, we're going to be moving to our virtual collaboration demonstration. Before I send you to your breakout rooms, we have to set the context for this collaboration. So what are our objectives here in our very short collaboration session? Number one, there's a lot of great insight on the call and the 100 participants who are out there about virtual tools that you have found particularly helpful. So we want to use that insight, get it out and shared with everybody else, and collaboratively generate a list of virtual tools. That's our first objective. The second one, we want to show you how virtual breakout rooms work, as well as an example of a collaborative whiteboarding software that will hopefully inspire you as you're thinking about how to design effective sessions. All right, so as I was thinking about it, these objectives, what are the activities? How are we going to structure this? Well, we need a 3-step sequence. We need to immerse folks to get them up to speed, get all of us on the same page. We need to diverge, generate that long list, and then we need to share it with everybody else who's in the room. So what are our virtual tools that we've selected to do that? Well, you just kind of saw the 30-minute immersion session where we use Zoom and PowerPoint to bring everybody up to speed. During our collaboration session, we're going to be using Zoom breakout rooms as well as Mural whiteboarding software to generate that long list. And then we're going to follow up and share the list with everybody else after the fact using a follow-up email. So a few rules before we move you to your session. In a moment, you will automatically be placed in a breakout room with an RTI facilitator. You can leave the breakout room at any time if you don't want to participate in this collaborative session. There's a button when you get moved into the room, there'll be a button that says leave breakout session. When you click that, it'll actually return you to the main room, so you can stick around for the Q&A at the end if you would like. This is maybe the most important kind of instruction here. As we move you to your breakouts, you've been automatically muted as you entered. You will be automatically unmuted when you move to the breakout so that you can participate. So just be aware, be prepared, and after you get moved, if you want to, you can remute yourself. I would advise, unless you're speaking, go back on mute. The breakout's going to last about 15 minutes, and then we'll bring everybody back for a Q&A session. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat window. We'll address those. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Cameron and ask him to distribute the teams into their virtual breakouts.
Okay, everyone, you're going to receive a prompt. Also check the lower right-hand corner of your screen to enter your breakout. So I'll do that now. Okay, everybody's returning back now.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You're getting kind of dropped in out of your session into the main session. What I want to take a moment to do is show folks kind of the bird's eye view of the software platform we were using. So I'm going to drop this in here and let you see kind of what I could see as you all were participating. So one thing I like about this software platform for virtual collaboration is that it allows you to create separate spaces within the same whiteboard space. So you can see each of you were in one of these squares contributing to the discussion, contributing to the breakout. And then I, as the master moderator, could kind of see what's going on across all of the rooms. I could drop into specific rooms if I needed to, if there's a question or I saw some people struggling. And there's many ways that you can use the physical space, or excuse me, the digital space of a whiteboard like this to kind of help run and help you accomplish goals within your session. All right, so hopefully that was helpful.
I'm done here.
We've got number one, you get to see a breakout. Number two, you get to see Mural in action. And of course, we demonstrated how to use polling features as well. All right. At this point, we're going to move to a brief Q&A session. I've got a couple questions that I'm going to address that came in through the chat window. If you have some questions you'd like answered here in the last 5 or 10 minutes, please drop them in the chat as well. So one question that came in through the chat window was, how can we use frameworks that need to converge input from many options down to a single option or perhaps a handful of options? Does it have to be done offline by a facilitator, or is there an option where the whole team can provide input on the content? I really like this question. It's a great question that demonstrates how the objective of the session and some considerations outside the realm of tools have to be answered first before we can figure out, should we do this online or offline? So when we think about moving from a long list of options down to a prioritized set, a couple questions I would ask at the very beginning. The first question is, who gets to decide at the end of the day which options get prioritized? If it's a single individual, perhaps the leader or the decision maker, then you can get input, but maybe that leader takes that decision making offline. If, however, your goal is alignment of the group and a collaborative decision making process, then I would encourage you to do that together in the room as a group. That would be kind of the first decision tree point. Even there, you're not ready to pick a tool yet, because then you want to ask of the group, what is the criteria by which we will prioritize? Are we prioritizing on the basis of alignment with existing strategy, potential long-term impact, or direct addressing of a particular need? So the next step in prioritization would be, what's the criteria by which we're telling people to choose? And then only when we have those two things kind of ironed out would I say, all right, now you're ready to select your tool. If you're doing this collaboratively, perhaps you move to Mural and you let them dot vote with sticky notes. Perhaps you just run through another voting scheme and then lead to a discussion after the fact. But it's absolutely possible to converge in a virtual space. It may take a little longer, but it's absolutely important if you want alignment around that final decision. Okay, how do you deal with the latency issues that can occur? This is one of those answers. I don't have a great answer for that. Couple tips. Video obviously increases bandwidth usage. It's really important for nonverbal cues, but sometimes limitations in bandwidth mean we have to go audio only. And so that's one way to deal with it. The other is to establish rules and norms about kind of speaking and then pausing before somebody else speaks. That allows the bandwidth latency to catch up and you don't end up speaking over each other. Question, how do we get access to Zoom and Mural for a session we're planning? Both are subscription services to my knowledge. Mural is not, there's details about that on their website. Zoom, I believe, has actually opened up for a lot of nonprofits and school institutions recently, free access up to a certain number of people. Next question, is accessibility measures being incorporated for those that are hearing and visually impaired? That's a great question, and it really speaks to going back to that people, time, and place element when you're running a collaborative session. Knowing your participants. Are those considerations that you need to incorporate into the design of the session? I don't have a ton of experience solving those particular issues in the virtual environment, but I would bet that there are a lot of resources out there, especially a growing number of resources as more people move to virtual work. My best advice would be, if that is a consideration for your group, make sure you're leaving adequate time and planning to factor that into the design of your event. Okay, with only a couple minutes left, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff Cope to talk a little bit about next steps and bring us home. If you have other questions, drop them in the chat and we'll try to respond and follow up via email. Jeff, are you there?
And unmute. Here we go. Latency issues. So sorry about that. Thanks again to Jim. Did a great job today. Thank you all for joining us and spending the past hour with us. Hope this has been a really helpful and informative period of time for you. We put this material together because we're thinking about all the ways that we can be helpful to our clients and our friends and our followers as we adjust to this new normal that we find ourselves in. There's more that we're going to share as a result of this. You're going to get a follow-up email that'll have this recording. It's going to have the resources that Jim alluded to, the 2 handbooks. We'll also have the results of the collaborative tool exercise that we did. So all of that will be coming in the next few days once we get the recording captured. But please, you see our contact information on the screen. Please reach out to us. Let us know kind of challenges that you're facing with moving from physical to virtual events. We would love to be helpful to you in the follow-up activities. The office hour link will also be in the email. So sign up for an office hour, reach out to Jim, reach out to me. Let us know how we can be helpful to you in the days ahead. And I just want to end with best wishes for everybody. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll all get through this together. Take care.
Thank you very much. Excellent session. Very, very helpful. Super.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Cameron, you can go ahead and stop the recording.